Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Ethan, along with my co-host, Rick. And today I am going to interview my father in a board game called Resist. So let's talk about that. Episode 76. Can you believe that? So first off, we're going to start with three basic things. We're going to go to a little bit on how to play, a little bit of the uniqueness of the game, and at the end, give your full-on opinion, your likes and dislikes, and give us a rating, if you can, if you're willing, out of a 10. So let's start off, first off, with the how to play. Like, how is this game, how is it?
Yeah, just to talk about Resist a little bit. I just want to, really the big thing about Resist is it's a single-player game. That's it. It's just for one player. It's designed by David S. Thompson. I love David S. Thompson games, so just want to be upfront about that. David Thompson did War Chest, which I love. Is that kind of... It's a game. We need to talk about it one time on an episode. It's fantastic.
Oh, definitely.
It's a fun little poker chip game, strategy. He did also the Sniper Elite hidden room movement game that we love so much. And he did the Undaunted series. That's probably what he's known the most about. So he loves these kind of war game, based on kind of historical events. And Resist is that game. The theme of the Resist is during... the original kind of Spain, kind of a revolution in Spain when Spain was going to kind of a communist government. There were people that resisted against that. You're playing as these rebels kind of resisting against, the communist government that's going to take over, or the totalitarian government. I don't know if it's communist or not. So in this game, it's a card-playing game. You're basically got 4 locations kind of set out in front of you. They're called missions, and certain things can happen on these missions. Cards get played on the game side, I guess, on the console side to kind of stop you. There are different types of things. You'll have a soldier or a general, and you got to pick a mission on your turn. So basically in this game, what you're going to have a deck, like most of these games are. If the deck ever runs out, you're over. You've got kind of each card has a hidden side and an exposed side. It's kind of really cool. So it's kind of like these people are like, in history they were rebels, right? So they were living normal lives, but they were also of the resistance. They were hidden. The government didn't know who they were. So on these cards, you'll have, like I said, a hidden and a reveal side. Mm-hmm. So you got to decide when you play them what you're going to play. Are you playing the hidden side? And the hidden side's always a little weaker. But if you play that, they go back in your deck. If you play the reveal side, it's more powerful, but then it's kind of like they sacrifice themselves to be exposed, and they go in your discard pile. So you get less and less of this. Also, when your deck starts, you start with a certain amount of spies in the deck. So those cards are worthless. They just don't count anything, and unless you play certain cards to get rid of them and move them to the discard, they go back in your draw pile also. So you're constantly trying to play this, do I want to, use the hidden power? It's a little weaker, but I get that guy back, or do I want to play a reveal side? So you'll pick a mission on the beginning of your turn, and then you kind of you start deciding how you're going to play your cards. You're playing them hidden, you're playing reveal, you're going on that mission. The mission has a certain amount of points, basically, that you have to overcome to defeat it, and you decide how to apply your points. Each mission can have a bunch of cards that are supporting the mission, and you can decide, are you going to go for the mission itself and try and clear it, or are you going to go after those cards so that they're not there for future turns? If you fail a mission, you can only fail 2 missions and the game's over, so you got to try and make sure you clear that mission. And if you do, there's some rewards with that potentially. There also can be some negatives, like you add cards to other missions to fight against you. And then you draw a new mission, and you got to survive until you get enough points at the end. At the end of each round, you decide if you're going to continue on. And depending on how many missions you've beaten, you get that many points, and that's where you kind of are on the scale. Did you, there's a scale. Did you basically, kind of survive the rebellion? Did you actually kind of push back and get the government to change a little bit, or did you overthrow the government? And that's the ultimate piece to that game.
That's very interesting. And tell me next, yeah, about like some of the mechanics that you might have noticed. In the box description, it said something that was very interesting to me. It said it was something of a solitaire type game. Obviously, I set it up the game. I set it up some of the rules, but it said solitaire. I didn't see that, but obviously you played it.
It's 100% solitaire in the sense. I think what that means, Ethan, is not like the solitaire card game.
Mm-hmm.
It's solitaire from the standpoint it's just a single player game. There are no two players. There's no way to play this two players. It's not one of these games where it can be one or two players where you're kind of working against each other, or maybe the other player can be the enemy. It's 100% designed to play by yourself. And that comes out in the game mechanics. Some of these games that are one or two, it's really designed to be kind of like you against another player, or it's, you're kind of two players working together, but it's really a one-player game. This is a one-player game, and they don't hide that. And that's what makes it kind of fun. It's a small box, throw it in my suitcase when I go on business trips, and I can play in the hotel and no problem. So from that standpoint, it's really cool. The mechanics, really, I think the core mechanic is that decision on what you're going to do, because you have to decide if you're going to play the hidden cards all up front, and you do only those hidden cards, and then you have to play anything else you play afterwards is revealed. So depending on what you play, you might get a draw. Like if you play on the hidden phase, you play like 3 cards, and it might let you draw extra cards. You might get crappy cards. You could draw a bunch of spies, but it's too late. And now you have to use all the reveals. Maybe you were like, I'm just going to draw these hidden cards, and I'm going to get to draw more cards off the deck, and they're going to help me get over the hump on this mission. But then you realize, crap, I draw a bunch of crap. Now I have to use all the reveal powers just to get the mission done. But now you're weakened because you didn't get to do that. So that's kind of the push and pull of, okay, do I want to expose this guy and get this super powerful card, but then he is gone for the rest of the game? I will say, for me, and I've only got to play it a couple of turns, or rounds, or games, I played like 3 games. It's hard. It's difficult.
And so, again, about that game mechanic with the decision, that's very intriguing, because in a first-player game, what I've noticed playing a couple was, it was just, in some games that are not designed to be first players, but they have a variant of playing it in a first player way. It feels like you have too many options, and where the game sometimes feels a little too easy. But it's interesting that you say that, obviously, since this game is designed to be a one player, it does really well at it. And that's...
Absolutely. It is one player game. And there's a lot of games you can play one player. There's a couple games I don't mind, like Marvel Champions. I might set up 2 players and play it by myself. And that's the Marvel deck building game from not really deck building, but you can build a deck. But
which we'll probably have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll only talk about that. That's one of my favorite card games ever. And we're just busy, we're not going to play it as much, but I do want to get back to it. You can play that, like you can set up a deck where you're playing by yourself, or you can set up 2 heroes. This is literally designed to be one player. And it really comes off as that. It's designed to be one player. It's just a card game you're trying to decide.
And since we know now that it is a really good first one-player game, and you've pointed out a lot of cool, unique things into it, with our next segment being about the uniqueness of the game, what is maybe one of your favorite points that you might like that is very unique to the game, or maybe something you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, I think the part that I like, obviously that push-pull between hidden and reveal powers is awesome. The deck of I guess what I'd call the bad guys, the enemy characters that come up, make it unique because you don't know what you're going to pull. There's soldiers that do certain things, but there's different mechanics that may add spies to your deck, or may be like a bodyguard character. So before you kill this other character that's really powerful, this soldier came out. You got to waste points on it. So it's kind of cool that way. But what I think is really neat, that I'll be honest, I haven't gotten to get into yet because I just want to play the base game, is he built this with like a campaign. So usually what happens is there's 3 levels of missions. There's like a level 1 type of mission, a level 2 type, and a level 3 type. And the way you set up the mission deck, You remove some of those from the game in the base game, so you have like 3 level 1s and like 3 level 2s and like 2 level 3s. And again, after each round, you decide how far do you want to go, because you're basically trying to see how good did you do, right? Did you get in, did you score at the best you could score and you won the resistance, right? But in essence, you're trying to see, it's a way to judge yourself. Like, oh, this time I scored 10 points before I quit. Because if you don't finish 2 missions, the game's over, you lost. So you got to decide each round, am I going to continue and try to get more points and see if I can get that top score. But what he also did is he sets up a campaign. So there's like 3 campaigns in the rule book where it's a certain set of missions in a row, and you have to beat all of them. And he designed it that way with certain special rules for each campaign. So I haven't gotten into that yet, but just what an interesting flavor for a game, right? It's not just, hey, play it this way, and I drew these different missions, so that turned out cool. And the next, no, he set up campaigns inside of those missions and how they connect. That makes that kind of cool too. Can you get through all? It's not like, hey, I beat these missions, I got the top score. No, I've got to finish every level like an old video game to get to the end. I thought that was kind of cool.
That's interesting. And you said that in the campaigns there's some special rules into it, correct?
Yeah, there's certain rules. I haven't gotten through the campaigns enough, but you might not be able to play certain things, or maybe you stack the enemy decks a little bit. But a lot of it has to do with you have to play certain missions. Some of those missions are harder than others, but they play off each other a little bit.
And that's very interesting. Again, pointing out that this is just a one-player game and how much thought the designer put in. Not just to make a fun game to play every now and then, but also a campaign to keep, bringing you back into the game.
Yeah,
that's very
Thompson
interesting.
Does this. Another game we have that you and I have that I know we want to play is that Undaunted Stalingrad, which is kind of a campaign version of Stalingrad, which is, again, a card-driven strategy, board games. Kind of tough to describe. You're playing kind of like a war game, with cards and moving them around. We kind of want to get into that. War Chest is another game that I mentioned earlier. With poker chips, and these chips can move, and just like any other kind of game with minis, right? They can move and have certain types of attacks. War Chest, he designed that, and they're actually coming out with another War Chest expansion, by the way.
Oh, very nice.
That looked pretty cool. But this kind of is just a simple game. He has another game that I've heard that's very good. It's actually, I think it may be a GMT game. I'm not sure. Which is very historical.
GMT.
And GMT has these. GMT has these games that are just chits, and we can get into talking them that are just crazy. But then they have simpler games like Fort Sumter. Well, he did one that was called Soldiers in Postman Uniforms. And it's about this attack of I believe the Soviet Union or somebody against Poland. And these post office workers actually turned into, defending the country. So it's called Soldiers in Postman. But anyway, I digress. But this is kind of his bread and butter. He loves to talk, do historical accuracy. There's some of that flavor on the text. There's flavor in the rule book explaining what this game's about, what it's based on. So if you're kind of interested in that, but maybe you don't want to get deep into a real intricate war game with all these rules, or you just want a cool solo game with a cool solo experience, man, Resist is... Man, it's up there with like Final Girl as far as single player games. I know we want to talk about that on another episode.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of games we got to talk about. No, but and also like again, I set it up. I didn't actually finish playing, but even the setup, it's very simple. It's very easy to put up on the table, and that's something that you also want in a first player game. Obviously, again, going back to some of those games that aren't designed for first player, but there's variants to play that first player.
This is a solo player game.
This is a solo player game, and setup is easy.
Setup is simple. There's a stack of spy cards. I think there's like 7 or 8. Your deck, there's I want to say there's 32 or 36 cards that are yours. You kind of split that evenly, so you start with half the deck in the discard pile, well, in the revealed pile. They're out of the game, kind of. There's ways to pull those characters in, but you start with half the deck gone. And then you have your deck. And then you have to add spies to it. And then you set up all the missions. each mission kind of has a little setup, so they have so many, so basically you have a row of mission cards, and below that is your kind of play area. Above that, each mission can have these bad guys, these soldiers or engineers, whatever it is, they support the government. They're set up across, and you're adding and taking away. You're trying to take these guys out because sometimes you can't finish the mission unless you beat some of them. So you're kind of doing that. So that's kind of the other uniqueness of the game, is no game's the same. Because depending on when you shuffle your deck, your kind of resistance deck, you take half those cards out. So each game you're starting with a new deck of characters. There's not like you can't just pick a perfect strategy. You have to adapt with the cards you're pulling each time. So that's kind of cool.
That's pretty cool.
And like I said, I'm not a huge solo gamer. I'd rather play with you or with the fam or with our friends, big games or just one-on-one with you is a lot more intriguing to me. Even like cooperative games we're playing together. But this game was just really, really cool. I mean, it was really good.
That's fantastic. I definitely need to try that out. And going into our final, I forgot the word. Segment. There you go. Thank you. Going into our final segment, we have your opinion. Now, you can do this any way. You could start off with just a little summary of what you like, and then do the rating, or do the rating first and do the summary. You go.
Yeah, I mean, my take on... For me to give out a 10, it's got to be like a game I just thoroughly enjoy. Like, and I don't get it caught up in, it's got to be this, or it's got to be complex. It's just got to be a game that I really just enjoy playing, like the whole experience. So it's tough for me to give a solo game that, because I'm not a solo gamer. For me, like 10s are like Rebellion, Kanban, Star Wars Rebellion, Kanban EV, games I just enjoy or enjoy playing the experience, the story. This game tells a cool story. It's still just a solo game with cards, so I wouldn't give it a 10, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give it like an 8.5. Wonderful. I mean, I really loved it. Maybe I'm almost on the precipice of a 9. It's just, I really just enjoyed it from this, but it's still a game I'm playing on myself. I don't know if I can give a solo game a 10.0.
That's interesting. Well, and so an 8.5, correct?
Yeah, 8.5 for me. I think I'd give it an 8.5 out of a 10 scale. Yeah. That's what I would do. Just again, because it's still a solo experience.
8.5. Very interesting. So, obviously, you all know what that means, folks. An 8.5 for a board game, especially for a solo, has to be really good.
Yeah, as solo games go, if I was just like on a solo game scale, I'd give it a 10 for me on a solo game
on a
scale,
solo
right?
game scale.
But overall game, the other point that I talk about is being, the person that buys games a lot, it's like $28 on like Miniature Market.
Yeah.
Again,
very
just
cheap.
For the experience you're getting out of that box for $28, that's a pretty good deal.
It is, and also as well as the gameplay time as well. It doesn't take too long, correct, to play?
20 to 30 minutes, maybe 30, probably 30. I'd say it's a solid 30 if you're trying to play to win.
Yeah, and again, the card and component quality is fantastic. So you have all that. So you gave it an 8.5. The BoardGameGeek.com, a free website you can all go to check out different ratings and cool forums of different games. You can check it out for free. They gave Resist, the board gaming community, gave Resist a 7.7 out of 10.
Yeah,
and that's pretty good.
That's pretty good for a solo game. You're going to get a solo game tax, I would call it, on that. You're always going to be about a point lower. Again,
that's interesting.
There's no components to it. I don't know. I don't want my solo game to be this complex setup. It's a bunch of cards, and I can take it anywhere. And it excelled at that.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dad/Rick, for being here today. Taking your time to review this fun solo game that I definitely need to check out. Again, the game is called Resist. And you can get it at Miniature Market.
You can get it anywhere.
Anywhere.
Actually, it's
in
kind
your
of hard
local
to get
board
right
game
now.
store.
It's pretty tough to get, but it's Resist with a exclamation point.
Exclamation point. So check it out. And
David
again,
S. Thompson does it again.
Yes, he does. Another great war theme hit. And hopefully we'll talk about more about his games in upcoming episodes as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you all on the next one.